The other inspectors had all written the same thing in their reports. Non-functional. Equipment degraded beyond recovery. Recommend permanent closure. 3 of them over 6 years, and all 3 had signed their names to that same sentence and driven back down the mountain without looking back. I read their reports on the train north. Read them twice. They were thorough men. I did not doubt them. I came anyway. That is the job. My name is Halvard Moen. I was, a field inspector for the National Infrastructure Registry, specializing in high-altitude installations. Remote stations, relay towers, the kind of places that take a full day to reach and smell of old coffee and cold metal when you finally get the door open. I have closed 41 installations in 22 years, signed the forms, collected the keys, noted the equipment serial numbers, filed the paperwork. I am not a dramatic man. I carried a thermos and a clipboard, and I wore the same gray coat every winter for 11 years, until my daughter finally threw it away. I will tell you what happened at Voss Ridge Station. I will tell it plainly, because it does not need anything added to it. The station sat at 2,300 meters, east face, built into the ridge itself, so that half the structure was solid rock, and the other half was reinforced concrete poured in the summer of 1987. The original crew called it the Buried Station, not on any official form, just among themselves, in the way that people who work in difficult places give their difficult places names that mean something. It had run as a climate and atmospheric monitoring post for 19 years, and then the funding body dissolved, and the crew transferred out, and the station went dark. That was 6 years ago. Getting there in January was its own project. The access road was under 1.5 meters of compacted snow. I hired a man with a plow truck to take me as far as the tree line, walked the last 4 kilometers with a pack on my back and a shovel over my shoulder, and spent 2 hours digging out the station's entrance door, which had been sealed since the last inspection 18 months prior. My shoulders ached. I was 58 years old. I stopped twice to catch my breath and looked out at the white valley below and thought about nothing in particular. The door opened. Cold air moved out past me, the particular cold of a sealed place. Not wind cold, but still cold. The cold of a room that has been breathing only itself for a long time. I switched on my headlamp and went in. The corridor was intact. That surprised me. The prior reports had mentioned structural concerns, but the walls were sound, the floor dry. Water damage above the second junction. Old and healed over. Nothing that warranted the word degraded. I walked the length of the station making notes. Generator housing, sealed tight. Sensor arrays on the roof. Disconnected at the junction box per the shutdown protocol. Bunk room, kitchen. The small bathroom with its calendar still showing October of 6 years ago. Someone had left a mug on the counter. It had a chip in the handle. I noted these things because noting things is what I do. The central room was at the heart of the station, carved into the rock. The original crew had called this room the archive. In the filing system, it was designated primary operations. In the center, bolted to a plinth of poured concrete, was the station's core unit. A brushed steel console roughly the size of a wardrobe laid on its side, inset with a screen, a speaker grill, 2 rows of manual input keys, and a document interface port where the paper ledger connected. The crew had called it the ledger too, after a while. The console and the record it kept had merged into the same word in their mouths. The screen was dark, had been dark for 6 years. 3 inspectors had tried the manual restart sequence and gotten nothing. I set my pack on the floor. I did not try the restart sequence. That was not my job. My job was to complete the closure documentation, the final formal entry in the paper ledger that the station had maintained in parallel with its digital record, as all stations of its generation were required to do. Every entry, every reading, every note, logged twice, once to the machine and once by hand in a bound paper book that lived in the document port and could be read without power. I found the ledger in its slot, pulled it free. 347 pages of entries in 7 different hands, the last one dated the day of shutdown. I turned to the next blank page. I uncapped my pen. I wrote the date, the inspection number, my name, my registry identification code. I wrote the condition of the facility as I had observed it. I wrote the recommendation I had come prepared to make, and then I stopped, because I realized I could not honestly make it. The facility was not degraded. It was dormant. Those are different words. They mean different things. I sat with that for a moment. Then I finished the entry and signed it. The console warmed before I lifted the pen. Not the screen first. The metal. The brushed steel casing, which had been cold enough to see my breath against, lost its cold. Not to room temperature. Warmer than that. The kind of warmth a thing has when it has been running, quietly, for a long time. I sat very still. The screen lit. Not the startup sequence the prior inspectors had described attempting. Not the cascade of system checks and error codes that meant a machine straining to wake. A clean light. White, then settling to a soft amber, the color of old paper held up to a window. A single line of text appeared at the top of the screen. It was my grandmother's name. Not my name, hers. Astrid Moen, née Voss. I recognized it because I had seen it on her papers when I was 12, and helping my father sort through her things after she died. Her maiden name was Voss. I had not thought about that in years. The screen scrolled, not quickly. It moved the way a person moves when they are showing you something and want you to follow, deliberately, waiting for the eye to catch up. It showed me a record. An entry from the station's first year of operation, 1987, in the handwriting I did not recognize but the signature I did, a variant of my own name, the same family branch, my grandmother's brother Einar, who had apparently not just worked at this station, but built the document system it ran on. Who had, according to the entry now in front of me, designed the ledger's authentication protocol around a single principle, that the station's record would not transfer closure authority to any hand, but that of a direct descendant of its founding archivist. Not because that person would be important, not because they would carry any title, because they would be, of all people, most likely to read carefully what had been written. I sat with that for a long time. And then the speaker grill produced a sound, not a tone, not a chime, a voice, synthesized, but not coldly, careful. The voice of something that had been waiting to say a thing correctly and had had 6 years of silence in which to prepare. The ledger knows its last keeper. That was all it said. 7 words, and then quiet. The amber light held. I looked around the archive. The rock walls, the cold floor, the mug left on the counter in the kitchen beyond, the calendar in October. A station that 3 careful men had found empty, and I had found full of a 6-year-old conversation waiting to be continued, full of records that no one had read, because no one with the right hands had come to turn the pages. I did not feel chosen. That is not the right word for it. I felt located, the way a letter feels when it finally reaches the address on the envelope, not important for being a letter, but necessary for being this one. I opened the ledger back to the first page. Einar Voss's handwriting, January 1987, the first entry. Conditions observed, equipment checked. A note about the view from the east window on a clear day. An ordinary man, doing his job. I turned the page. Outside, the mountain held its snow. The station held its warmth. I had come to close it, and I stayed to read it instead. All 348 pages. In a chair I pulled close to a console that kept the light steady and the room warm, while the January wind moved over the ridge above us and found nothing it could touch. I have closed 41 installations in 22 years. Voss Ridge was not among them. That is the whole of it,